Tonight we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters in another of his celebrated cases of crime and murder. Mr. Chameleon, as you know, is the dreaded detective who frequently uses a disguise to track down a killer, a disguise which at all times is recognized by the audience. Tonight we give you Mr. Chameleon in The Case of Murder and the $1 Million Smile. The opening scene of tonight's murder case is the drawing room of a richly appointed mansion overlooking Gramercy Park in New York City. It is late afternoon, and the master of the house, the elderly philanthropist, Julian Ford, has sent for his niece, Ethel, and her young husband, Alan, who share his home. And now, as they enter the drawing room, the old man smiles at them, little dreaming the words he is about to speak will lead to strange and horrible consequences.
Come in, children. Come in.
You wanted to see us, Uncle Julian?
Nothing is wrong, I hope, sir.
No, indeed, my dear boy. Quite the contrary, in fact. I've news for you and Ethel, which I'm sure will please you very much. Ethel, you and your husband have shared my home for some time now.
Oh, you've been very generous to us, Uncle Julian.
Nonsense. It's good for a lonely old man to have companionship. And now, in a few hours, we shall have an additional member to our little household.
An additional member?
Yes, Alan. I'm bringing a guest here. A young woman named Jennifer Gray. And from now on, she's going to make her home with us.
What are you saying, Uncle Julian?
Who is this Jennifer Gray?
Well, she's a girl I met some weeks ago when I was taking my walk in Gramercy Park. I've seen her every day since then. She's a waitress at a little restaurant downtown.
A waitress? And you're bringing her here, to this house, to live?
Yes, Ethel, dear. She has no family or friends. And not much education, I'm afraid. But her smile. By the moment I saw that warm, ingratiating smile of hers, I felt drawn to her. I felt toward her as if she was the daughter I've always wanted and never had.
Uncle Julian, we understand how you must feel and how kind you always are. But this girl, you know nothing about her.
She's probably a conniving little fortune hunter, taking advantage of an old man's loneliness.
Jennifer Gray is no fortune hunter, I assure you, Alan. She's a sweet, innocent child whom I shall bring here and perhaps someday even adopt as my daughter.
Uncle Julian, we realize how generous you are.
Too generous, perhaps, for your own good, Uncle. This young woman could be dangerous. She's a total stranger, and to bring her into this house...
Alan, this is my house. I am still the master of it. Now, I'm picking up Jennifer Gray at her rooming house at 7 this evening and bringing her home with me. And I know you and Ethel will show her every consideration.
As you wish, of course, Uncle Julian.
Naturally, sir.
Well, I'm going to the study. I'll see you both later.
He's gone. Alan, this is outrageous.
I always knew your uncle was eccentric, Ethel, but now he's gone stark, raving mad.
Alan, if he adopts this dreadful girl, he'll leave his money to her. Every penny of it, probably. She'll be getting money that belongs to us. Money I've waited for all these years, and I won't be cheated out of it. I won't, I tell you, I won't.
Your Uncle Julian is a fool.
What are we going to do, Alan? He's bringing her here at 7 o'clock.
Don't worry, my dear. She won't be coming here at 7 o'clock tonight or any other time. I give you my word, Ethel, Jennifer Gray will never set foot inside this house.
Now, promptly at 7 o'clock that evening, Julian Ford is at the old brownstone house where Jennifer Gray has a rented room. And he is greeted by the landlady, Mrs. Hester Krebs, who says to him,
Jennifer Gray is back in her room packing up her things, Mr. Ford. Come on, I'll go along with you. I want to say goodbye to her.
Thank you, Mrs. Krebs.
Oh, you know, Mr. Ford, it's a real fine thing you're doing for her. Ain't many girls alone in New York who are as lucky as she is.
I'm the one who's lucky, Mrs. Krebs, to have met a girl like Jennifer Gray. What a sweet, lovely child. She has the nicest smile I've ever seen. So warm and winning.
$1 million smile looks like it's turned out to be. Well, she deserves a break. She's real excited about going to live in that big, elegant house of yours. Here we are. This is her room.
Jennifer, Jennifer, my dear, it's Mr. Ford. I've come for you.
That's queer.
Jennifer, are you in there?
Well, the door's unlocked, Mr. Ford. You better go in. Jennifer, why didn't you... Oh, Mr. Ford, look. There on the bed. Oh, it's Jennifer Gray.
Dear heaven, there's a knife in her throat. Mrs. Kreb, call the police. Hurry, the poor girl's been murdered.
Now, half an hour later, we find Mr. Chameleon, the famed and dreaded detective, and his assistant, Detective Dave Arnold, in the murdered girl's room. Julian Ford and the landlady stand nearby as Mr. Chameleon says,
Dave, Jennifer Gray was stabbed to death sometime shortly before 7 o'clock tonight.
It looks as if a cyclone had been through this room, Mr. Chameleon.
Yes, overturned bureau drawers, papers scattered over the floor. Whoever was here must have been looking for something. Dave, search the room for clues, please. Oh, this is horrible, Mr. Chameleon. Horrible. You're Julian Ford, aren't you? The millionaire with a reputation for helping people. Well, I made my money through pure good luck, Mr. Chameleon, when they found copper on some property I owned. I always felt I wanted to share my wealth with those less fortunate than I. Like Jennifer Gray, for instance? Yes. I have a house on Gramercy Park where my niece, Ethel, and her husband live with me. And I'd invited Jennifer to stay with me, too. How well did you know the murdered girl, Mr. Ford? Well, I met her a couple of weeks ago. I was attracted by her simplicity and charm, and we became great friends. And now she's been murdered, and it's my fault. Your fault, Mr. Ford? Why do you say that? Because if I'd arrived half an hour earlier, she might never have been murdered.
Mr. Chameleon, I found this on the floor.
Oh, let's have it, Dave. A man's gold cigarette lighter. Obviously expensive. Mrs. Kreb, you're the landlady here?
That's right, Mr. Chameleon, and I run the pawn shop next door.
Who were Jennifer Gray's men friends, if any?
Well, there was only one I knew of, Mickey Collins, and they had a terrible fight last night.
A quarrel? What about?
How should I know, Mr. Chameleon? But I heard him arguing up here in her room. He sounded good and angry. Oh, he lives down the block at number 712.
Dave, have Mickey Collins picked up and brought to police headquarters. I want to find out about that quarrel he had with Jennifer Gray and if it led to her murder.
Mr. Chameleon, I can't believe Jennifer's dead. I loved her.
Come now, Mickey Collins, pull yourself together.
You're in a tough spot, Collins. You had a fight with Jennifer Gray the night before her death. Maybe you wound up that fight by killing her.
That's a lie. Yes, I went to see Jennifer last night, sure, but I didn't quarrel with her. I wanted her to go back to Cedar Springs with me.
Oh, that was her hometown and yours, Collins?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon. Jennifer and I grew up there together.
And when she wouldn't go back, you threatened her life.
No, I didn't. I love Jennifer, I tell you. Last month, she left town and came here to New York without any explanation. I followed her and traced her here to the rooming house last night. I was worried about her.
Why?
Because she was frightened, Mr. Chameleon. She was living in terror of her life.
In terror of her life, Collins? What did she mean?
She told me she found out something and wanted to go to the police. But she was afraid to. Afraid that someone might kill her if she did. I begged and pleaded, but she wouldn't explain.
That sounds like a phony yarn to me, Collins. It's much more likely you got angry and jealous because she was going to live in that millionaire's house. So jealous it drove you to murder.
That's not true, Detective Arnold. Sure, I wanted to marry Jennifer. But I was glad of her good fortune. If that's what she wanted.
Possibly, Collins. Or, as Detective Arnold suggests, you may have wanted to stop her from walking out of your life and invented the story of her being terrified. But that remains to be seen. You may go for the present, but stay in your rooming house down the street.
Pretty emotional guy, that Mickey Collins.
Yes, but he could be telling the truth, Dave. A young girl living in fear of her life. But afraid of whom? And why? Dave, let's drive over to Julian Ford's house. I'd like to have another talk with him.
And meanwhile, in the drawing room of the home of the millionaire philanthropist, Julian Ford, his niece, Ethel, is alone when the door opens and her husband enters.
Alan! Alan, where in heaven's name have you been?
Keep your voice down, will you, Ethel? Where's your uncle?
Uncle Julian's in the study. Oh, Alan, that girl, Jennifer Gray, he intended bringing here to live?
Yes, what about her?
She was found murdered, stabbed to death at her rooming house. Uncle Julian came home a few minutes ago and told me that detective, Mr. Chameleon, is on the case.
Chameleon? He's supposed to be one of the shrewdest cops in the country.
Well, at least we won't have to worry about Jennifer Gray threatening our security any longer. We can... Alan, what's the matter?
Ethel, listen to me. And listen carefully. If Chameleon comes here, I want you to tell him I didn't leave this house all day.
But that isn't true. Alan, where have you been since 5 o'clock?
Never mind that. But you're to tell this detective Chameleon I was in this house all day. Can you get that through your head, Ethel? My very life may depend on what you say to him.
That is a very interesting statement, Mr. Alan Drake.
What?
Who are you? And that man with you?
I'm Detective Arnold, and this is Mr. Chameleon of the police.
Oh, Mr. Chameleon.
And you, I take it, are Julian Ford's niece, Ethel, and this is your husband.
How did you get in here?
Yes, we didn't hear you.
Obviously not, Mr. Drake. However, Detective Arnold and I heard you very clearly, asking your wife to lie for you.
You misunderstood me.
Hardly. And a man doesn't need an alibi unless he's hiding something, like murder, for instance.
No. No, Alan didn't kill Jennifer Gray.
Quiet, Ethel. Mr. Chameleon, what you're suggesting is ridiculous. Why should I want to murder this Jennifer Gray, a total stranger?
Perhaps for a very logical motive, Alan Drake. Self-protection.
Self-protection.
Your wife's uncle is bringing Jennifer Gray to live here, perhaps even planning to legally adopt her as his daughter.
Why?
As matters now stand, your wife inherits Julian Ford's entire fortune. However, if Jennifer Gray had come here, had been adopted by him, you and your wife would undoubtedly have lost that fortune.
You've no right to say that. We didn't resent that girl coming here. When Uncle Julian told us, we were delighted about it.
Of course we were.
Mr. Drake, Detective Arnold and I overheard you warning your wife to tell us that you hadn't left the house today. We know differently. Where were you between 5 o'clock and 7 this evening?
I was taking a walk. I asked Ethel not to mention I was out because I didn't want to become a suspect in that girl's murder.
You've already made yourself a very strong suspect, Mr. Drake. You had plenty of time to go to Jennifer Gray's room and stab her.
No, he didn't. Alan wouldn't.
And as for you, Mrs. Drake, you also had a motive.
What?
The threat of losing your inheritance, and with it possibly your husband's love as well.
Oh, stop it. I didn't go near Jennifer Gray's rooming house.
And neither did I.
It's no use, my boy. Tell them the truth.
Uncle Julian.
Come in, please, Mr. Ford. Alan, if you'll be honest with Mr. Chameleon, we can help you.
What are you trying to do? Involve me in murder?
Oh, you're already involved, Alan. Mr. Chameleon already knows you were in Jennifer Gray's room. He found your gold cigarette lighter there.
What?
This is your lighter, isn't it, Mr. Drake? It has the initials A.D. engraved on it.
All right. Yes, it's mine. But I didn't kill Jennifer Gray. You've got to believe me.
Alan.
I went to see her to persuade her to change her mind about coming to live here. When I opened the door to her room, she was lying across the bed with a knife in her throat. It was horrible.
Oh, Alan, my poor, unfortunate boy.
And I didn't call the police because I didn't want her murder pinned on me.
Alan. Oh, Alan, you said that she would never set foot in this house, but I never dreamt you meant to...
Ethel, you little fool. I told you I didn't kill her. What are you trying to do, send me to the electric chair?
All I wanted was to help that girl. If I had known it would result in this...
I tell you I didn't kill her. Mr. Chameleon, look. I found something on the floor in Jennifer Gray's room. Here, take it.
What is it, Mr. Chameleon?
A bracelet, Dave. A diamond bracelet.
What? what would a girl like Jennifer Gray be doing with a diamond bracelet? Uncle Julian, had you been giving that girl expensive presents?
I know, Ethel. Certainly not.
I doubt if your uncle gave her this one at any rate. This bracelet looks like some jewelry that was reported stolen some weeks ago.
Stolen? You mean Jennifer Gray has been stealing jewelry? Oh, no. No, I don't believe it.
The fact this bracelet was discovered in her room doesn't mean that she stole it, Mr. Ford. Dave and I are going back to police headquarters. As for you, Alan, I have not arrested you yet. But don't leave the house until you hear from me.
I swear I'm innocent, Mr. Chameleon. I swear it.
Mr. Chameleon, about that diamond bracelet, I don't get it.
I think I'm beginning to get it now, Dave. When we get to headquarters, I want you to check on something. Meanwhile, I want to see the murdered girl's suitcase, the one she was in the middle of packing when she was murdered. I've a feeling an important clue may be in that suitcase.
And now, sometime later at Central Police Headquarters, Mr. Chameleon is in the office of the police commissioner. The murdered girl's valise is on the desk, and the commissioner is saying,
Jennifer Gray's suitcase was brought in exactly as it was, Chameleon. She must have been packing it to move to Julian Ford's house when she was murdered.
Yes, so I gather, Commissioner.
Do you expect to find a clue among her things?
Amazingly enough, Commissioner, I've already found it. But not among her clothes.
Oh, excuse me. Police Commissioner speaking. Yes, he is. Just a second. It's for you, Chameleon. Lieutenant Dale calling.
Oh, thanks. Lieutenant Dale? You're calling from the Federal Trust Company? I see. You found it, eh? Yes. Yes, go on. I see. Good work, Lieutenant Dale. Thank you very much.
Come in.
Oh, Dave, come in. Did you check on what I asked you to?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon, and you were right. The landlady, Mrs. Krebs, who runs the pawn shop next door to Jennifer Gray's rooming house, has a police record, sure enough.
I thought I recognized her.
5 years ago, she was arrested for using her pawn shop as a fence. She was charged with being a receiver of stolen goods.
She still runs the pawn shop. And the diamond bracelet discovered in the murdered girl's room looks like the stolen bracelet.
Great Scott. Young Mickey Collins, who was in love with Jennifer Gray, said she had discovered something and was terrified.
Mr. Chameleon, Mrs. Krebs could have murdered that girl because she was afraid Jennifer would go to the police. And maybe she planted the stolen bracelet in the murder room to make it look like Jennifer Gray was a thief.
Dave, I'm sure I know now who the murderer is, but I'm going to use a disguise to get the proof.
What kind of a disguise, Chameleon?
I'm going to become temporarily Caleb Watson, a crusty, eccentric old uncle of Jennifer Gray's, who's just arrived in town. And this will be the voice of my disguise.
Hi, Jingo. Sure feels mighty good to be down here in New York. Well, they're always talking about them smart city slickers. Let me tell you, a few of us country folk got a thing or two up our sleeves. Yes, sirree.
Hey, that's great, Chameleon.
You want me to get all the suspects down here, Mr. Chameleon?
No, that won't be necessary. Dave, I want you to make just one telephone call. And then I'm going to pay a visit to that pawn shop of Mrs. Hester Krebs, disguised as Caleb Watson. And this is what I'm going to do.
And sometime later, we see Mr. Chameleon, disguised as Caleb Watson, entering the dingy little pawn shop. Now, as Mrs. Krebs comes forward, Chameleon, in the voice of his disguise, says,
You, Mrs. Krebs, lady who owns this pawn shop?
That's right. Got something you want to borrow money on?
No, ma'am. My name is Caleb Watson. I'm Jennifer Gray's uncle. I just got into town this evening and heard about her being murdered.
Jennifer Gray was your niece?
Yeah. Mighty fond of her. She of me. Mrs. Krebs, I come to claim something that belonged to Jennifer, and that I reckon you took from her room. The key to her safe deposit box.
A key? I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, now, maybe you'll change your mind when I tell you that I know all about the little racket you're running here. Jennifer called me yesterday saying she'd found out that you were trading in stolen goods.
What? You must be crazy.
Well, now, I could go to the police with that story, ma'am, but
You give me the key you stole from Jennifer's room, and I won't.
I haven't got any key. I don't know anything about it.
You think it over, man. I'll be back. Oh, sorry, mister. Didn't see you standing in the doorway.
Why don't you watch where you're going?
Well, it said I was sorry, didn't I? Think over what I said, ma'am. I'll be back.
What about that key, Mrs. Krebs?
Mr. Ford, I don't know what that old fool was talking about.
Don't lie to me.
Mr. Ford, you're joking me.
Answer me. What have you done with that key?
I can't breathe.
Take your hands off her throat, Julian Ford.
Oh, Mr. Chameleon. It's you. You came here in disguise.
Mr. Chameleon, oh, Mr. Chameleon, you saved my life.
Were you trying to commit a second murder, Ford? Killing Jennifer Gray wasn't enough, I take it.
What? What the devil are you talking about?
I suspected you of Jennifer Gray's murder, Julian Ford, and you very conveniently walked into the trap I set for you when Detective Arnold telephoned you and asked you to come here.
Why, you're insane, Chameleon. Jennifer Gray was my friend.
She was also the daughter of Tom Gray, a man you defrauded 20 years ago when you jumped his claim to the Queen Anne copper mine after a mysterious accident in which he was killed.
Where did you get that information?
From an old newspaper in the bottom of the murdered girl's suitcase. Also from some papers in a safe deposit box. It's police routine to check on these matters, Mr. Ford. The newspaper told of Tom Gray's death at the mine. And the papers in the safe prove that he, and not you, was the legal owner of that fabulous copper mine.
Mr. Chameleon, are you saying this kind old man, Julian Ford, killed Jennifer Gray? Well, when did you suspect him?
My doubts were aroused at his home when he told his nephew Alan that I had discovered Alan's cigarette lighter in the dead girl's room. However, I hadn't shown you that lighter, Mr. Ford, so that you couldn't have known that it was your nephew's unless you yourself had planted it there, the way Alan planted the diamond bracelet there afterwards to take suspicion away from himself.
It's all right. All right, Chameleon. It's true I killed Jennifer Gray. I had to protect myself. A few days ago, Jennifer came to me with certain papers which she had discovered in the attic of her home, and which proved that she, not I, was the rightful owner of the copper mine. I'd have lost everything to her.
And she might eventually have even proved that you killed her father.
No, I didn't kill Tom Gray. That was an accident. But I took over his claim to the copper mine in my own name and made a fortune on it. Well, I told Jennifer I'd make restitution, but I needed time to think. So I invited her to stay in my home.
And she accepted, never dreaming that your motive was murder.
I was to pick her up at 7. At 6:30, I went to her room and stabbed her. At 7, I returned with Mrs. Krebs, pretending to discover her body. I thought no one would ever suspect that I, with my reputation for philanthropy, could be guilty of murder.
And one of the most cold-blooded and brutal murders I've ever encountered. Come on in, Dave. Put the handcuffs on this man. This is one time when I shall take great pleasure in watching the wheels of justice take their course.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. The part of Mr. Chameleon is played by Carl Swenson, written by Gene Carroll, based on the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert, directed by Henry Howard, with music selected by Victor Art.